Good afternoon, welcome back to the Word Celtic fans. We'll just put the desk up a bit. Welcome back to the channel. Martin O'Neill has had his press conference this afternoon, and I'm going to dive into his press conference. The main takeaways from the press conference from Martin O'Neill, my reaction to it. Obviously, the first thing that he was asked about being Scottish Cup weekend. He was asked about the Scottish Cup to the channel. He was asked about the Scottish Cup, and let me just do that. Press conference from Martin O'Neill. He was asked about his childhood memories. The only time that he got to see updates of Scottish football was during the English Cup finals. He was very calm. He was very. It wasn't very Martin O'Neill like, was it? It was like Martin O'Neill was a bit subdued. Now, was he subdued due to the fact that he didn't look confident? I definitely think that Martin O'Neill did not look confident in this interview. It was like Martin O'Neill. But anyway, let's get on to what Martin O'Neill said. He was warning, he was giving us a warning, wasn't he? He said the romance of the cup, but it comes with a label. If you're talking about romance of cup ties, yes, it's a romance of the cup. It is, it's not going to be an easy game. He mentions the fact that the game was moved because the police wanted it moved. It's been moved to a bigger ground. He's quite pleased that it was not the smaller venue. And it kind of gives you a bit of, it takes away the romance of the cup at being moved, doesn't it? From the home team's ground to Kilmarnock's ground. Let's face it. He did talk about Rugby Park, and he said that openly admits that the Celtic weren't good enough on plastic pitches. Playing this game on the plastic pitch at Kilmarnock, Celtic, will that be a bit of a leveller? And the fact that can history repeat itself? Because there's a Celtic player that played for Aberdeen that got beat by Darvel a few years ago at this stage of the cup. And can lightning strike twice for Liam Scales? Let's hope not. Martin O'Neill spoke about Rugby Park, and he says it doesn't, the fact that it is at a familiar ground doesn't guarantee success. We need to play a lot better. It was a warning to the players. And then it went straight on to the transfer speculation. And it was at that point that Martin O'Neill his body language did not look confident at all. Just didn't look confident talking about it. He was asked about Callum Wilson, and he says that that one caught him by surprise. He praised the player, but he says it was not one that we're really interested in. He thought he was always going elsewhere. So he obviously, there must have been some conversation with Wilson, and Celtic would have been told straight away not he's wanting to go to a foreign country to play. And the good thing about it is Martin O'Neill wasn't bluffing. He wasn't, smoke and mirror deflection. He just sat there and says, hopefully, by the end of next week, hopefully we'll have some players in. It wasn't very confident. It wasn't a very confident manager. He sat there and he acknowledged the fact that, look, players can't play on Thursday in the Europa, so it does give us a bit of time, but hopefully the time that we get to the Hearts game, we'll have some players in. Martin O'Neill are slowly taking the enthusiasm out of Martin O'Neill's comeback, that's for sure. He said that talks are happening, nothing has been signed yet. He knows that the pressure is mounting. He spoke about hating these interviews, and he said that he only comes here for the chat. Just he tried to make a bit of a joke out of it, didn't Martin? But the fact that Martin O'Neill had to resort to trying to make light of the situation, trying to make light of the situation, which is becoming apparent, is just depressing, at least when it comes to the transfers. What he did say, he was honest that he wants signings now. He knows the fans are expecting signings, and he feels the scrutiny daily. Talking about timeline pressures, and obviously the Bologna one and the Hearts urgency, he says this is one of the. He said Bologna too soon for reinforcements. We can't play them anyway because of the European rules on bringing in players during the competition. He said Hearts, I'd like to have some people in for Hearts if that was at all possible. Unbelievable that we're at the stage now where Martin O'Neill's not convinced. His body language says he's not convinced. His body language is deeply disheartening. Because we look to Martin O'Neill to be the father figure, and we look to Martin O'Neill to be the guy that picks us up and, gives us the little bit of hope that we can get to the end of the season and just be competitive. I think that hope, as Martin O'Neill used, has been taken from him. But anyway, he said there is a respect for the opposition, and just not only this game this weekend. He rejects the idea that they're just a junior side. He says we've had upsets at Celtic before when it comes to the cup, and he says there will be no excuse at all, just for a bad performance. Martin O'Neill wants no excuse at all for bad performances this weekend. Doesn't matter if it's on the plastic pitch. He says we need to keep the players grounded. There will be no excuses for performance dips. And he wants to prevent complacency at the club. He was then speaking about, he got asked about the Scottish Cup and a run to the Scottish Cup, and the first time round at Celtic Park, his last game in charge was the Scottish Cup. He spoke about the fact that we got beat by Motherwell. We all know what player scored for Motherwell that day. Celtic ended up ultimately buying the player, Skippy, our little Australian player. But he said it was good to finish on a high, but we had the Motherwell game was still in his mind. And I've got a funny feeling that I think that history could repeat itself. Celtic ultimately will lose out in the last day of the season. But on goal difference, could be something as simple as goal difference if we lose out the last day of the season. But then I think that Martin O'Neill might get us over the line for the Scottish Cup, which will be a bittersweet end to the season. It's always great getting to the Scottish Cup, and it'll be fantastic if we do get to the Scottish Cup. And Martin O'Neill will want to make sure that if we do get to the Scottish Cup final, that he'll know that the players will have a lot to prove. And he'll know that the players ultimately will want to go out on a high. It was a very, very depressing. Sunderland just released a statement saying no issues that require surgery. Unbelievable. Yet Celtic media were putting out that the player needed some surgery. Anyway, Martin O'Neill won't get ahead of himself. He respects the grind of this competition. He knows how quick things can unravel. You know, whilst he's haunted by previous mistakes at his time at Celtic first time round, you can understand why he doesn't want to make mistakes this time. And I think that he feels personally, body language is a big thing with people, and especially in this modern day. And Martin O'Neill doesn't like to hide his feelings, but you could tell that Martin O'Neill was suppressing his emotions, being in full, regret, and the fact that he didn't look forward to the press conference. It's very un-Martin O'Neill like. It wasn't a good sign, actually. It wasn't a good sign. But he's not complacent. He knows that signings are essential. He wants them now, not in late January. He respects the cup. He fears its dangers that you have in the cup. And it was a short interview by Martin O'Neill. It's only 5 minutes odd. One of the shortest interviews before a game. They seem to be getting shorter and shorter. And Martin O'Neill just not taking any pleasure in the interviews. And then up came Liam Scales. Liam Scales was up just before Martin. Oh. Um, Scales was going on about to calm the nerve amongst fans. He wants to show professionalism, show respect to the opponents, and he reinforced team unity pretty much with regards of the game this weekend. I was disappointed in Mountaineers' input at the last AGM where he'd been better saying nothing. That's behind us, mate. There's no point in dragging up the AGM. There's a lot happened since the AGM, hasn't there? There was no failed medical. Yes, there was no failed medical. I have no idea what was going on. Martin O'Neill knows, he just doesn't want to say what he knows yet. Yeah, I think he'll write a book. Hopefully, he writes a book about it and tells the world exactly what's going on at Celtic at his time and the struggles that he faced as manager. It was a very depressing interview by Martin, it has to be said. Very few top players and agents care about trophies. All they care about is cash. I filled a medical. My pip was cut. Was it a witch doctor we used? Well, I think it was maybe one off Timu. But anyway, that was the Martin O'Neill interview this afternoon. I think that every day at Celtic Football Clubs, things just seem to be going through some kind of downward spiral. And it's a downward spiral that has even now dragged Martin O'Neill into it, which I think is very depressing. Anyway, O'Neill will be happy to take the board's side when Rodgers was happy to take the board's side when Rodgers was in possession. Yeah. But anyway, right, that is me done and dusted for this afternoon and for today. I will be back. I'll be back tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, since it's a Saturday. And on that note, have a fantastic day. I'm just catching up. Nurse Catchit did the magical. Yeah, this is true. Anyway, let's just hope that we can get the good result this weekend.